And the heirs of a 19th century sultanate are seeking to seize Malaysian government assets in order to enforce a $15 billion arbitration award that they won against Malaysia. Malaysia said it had obtained a stay order against the enforcement of the ruling.
The injustice here has been done to the Sultanate of Sulu when we leased the land in 1878 to a company, a British North Korea company. It's not even a country because this is owned by the Sultanate of Sulu. Sabah was given by the Sultanate of Brunei as a token of gratitude. We own the property, but Malaysia is claiming that it's their property. So ito na, nirule out na ng court na it's clear that it is our property and that Malaysia needs to pay $14.9 billion for a property that we never benefited from. Instead, they benefited from it.
A Filipino family and the Malaysian government locking horns over a colonial-era land agreement. Kuala Lumpur invoked sovereignty after an arbitration court ruled that the heirs of the last Sultan of Sulu have rights over some of its assets. We break down a complicated case in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama ko po dito sa Mandaluyong si Ed Lingao of One News. And then with us online via Zoom, Ami Pamituan of the Philippine Star and Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5. Chiefs, happy Tuesday.
So,
Happy Tuesday.
Ami, what are we monitoring?
Well, yung mga 1.3 million daw, tuloy na yata ma-purge sila from the list of 4 peace beneficiaries. So, mukhang matutuloy na yan.
Ed?
Oh, well, still on the Sultanate of Sulu, I found the decision it's quite lengthy. Interestingly, it says there the decision that there was never any contract to cede the property to the North Borneo Company. It is a commercial lease contract. That's the ruling of the arbitral court. Therefore, it still, in the end, belongs to the Kirams.
Okay, and we will get into that later on. We'll try to break it down, but for now, we start with another matter. A group of drivers who are part of government's Libreng Sakay program is still unpaid. We hear more about their plight from the president of Buklod na Manggagawa sa ES Transport, Joji Visconde Jr. Mr. Visconde, welcome to the program, sir.
Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi po.
Sir, siguro umpisa natin sa yung kabuuan ng sitwasyon nyo at saka konting paglilinaw lang po. Pagka po sinabi natin na mga driver hindi pa bayad, are we talking about utang ng gobyerno, utang ng operator, and kung ano pa man po man to, kamusta po ang mga driver at mga operator?
Magandang gabi po sa lahat. Unang-una po, ito pong aming problema ay nung pang isang taon. Bagamat yun nga po, yung programang Libreng Sakay, hindi po namin naunawaan kung sa una po nakatulong pero sa bandang huli po ay kami ay lalong nagigipit. Bagkus, ang karanasan po namin sa ES Transport, sa ES Consortium, masyado na po dinilay ang sahod namin. Pagkatapos po, nung kami ay panayang dulog namin sa mga ahensya, follow-up, pinagturo-turuan po kami ng mga ahensya hanggang nagsimula po kami sa Office of the President sa Quadro 8. Tinuro po kami sa DOTR, sinulatan po, pinasa po sa LTFRB hanggang sa nakarating po kami sa DOLE na wala pong nagawa. Kahit ipatawag ng DOLE o anumang dialogo, hindi po kami hinarap ng may-ari hanggang sa nakamatayan nga po ng direktor. Ang naging pamamaraan po namin, sa tagal po ng pasahod na sobrang delay, nag-ingay po kami nitong Pebrero. Bagkos yung pag-iingay namin dahil dun sa masobra na pong delay na sahod, ay hindi na po talaga, wala na pong sapat na kwan sila dun sa kontrata. Sa kontrata na nakasaad na dapat ay kami ay sasahod, bagkus po dinelay ng dinelay. Sa tuwing magpapalo up po kami, ang sabi ay ang ng LTFRB, ng ahensya, naipasa na raw po yung liquidation sa mga operator, sa mga consortium. So, yun po, nag-intay kami hanggang sa inabot nga po kami ng Pebrero na talagang ginawa po kaming Bombay na hulug-hulugan lang po yung ginawang pasahod sa amin. Kaya po nag-ingay kami dahil sobrang kahabaan na po ng panahon na pinaghihintay namin. Nung pa lang po nag-umpisang magpasahod ng medyo tuloy-tuloy kung hindi po sa ginawa namin pag-iingay dahil talaga pong nababao na po kami sa utang ng mga panahon na yun.
Opo, Mr. Vizconde, para lang po maunawaan ng mga nanunood at ng taong bayan, pagka po sinabi natin hindi binibigay ang sahod, magkano po bang sahod ang pinag-uusapan natin dito? At meron din po ba kayong numero na pangkalahatan kung magkano ang utang sa lahat?
Sa amin pong pagsusuma, sa ES Group of Companies po na kinabibilangan ng ES Transport, GEL, KLN at Earthstar, ito po siguro maabot po ng mga kulang-kulang 20 milyon. Kasi po meron po kami sa buwan ng Abril na kulang, meron pa po kami sinisingil sa buwan ng Mayo noong 2021 pa. At karamihan po dito ay puro super po ang nakapaloob. Yung pong mga insentibo na nakasaad sa kontrata, may iilan lang pong nabigyan. Pero regarding po doon sa nakasaad sa kontrata, sa mga circular na memorandum, mas marami po yung hindi nakatanggap ng mga supero doon sa mga insentibo. Dahil pinadaan po nila sa GCash, inilagay po nila na bawat sumali akong lumahok sa programa nung Abril, ay makakatanggap po ng insentibo na mula 4,000, 5,000 hanggang 25,000 po. Pero ang lumabas lang po ay 20,000 sa iilang mga tsupero.
Pero sa ibig niyo po sabihin na ilabas na ng gobyerno yung pambayad pero bumara doon sa mga operators yung pera, yun ho ba? Para lang humalinaw.
Yun po ang gusto naming malinawan talaga na hinihingi po namin sa ahensya ng LTFRB. Katakot-takot pong follow-up ang ginawa namin ng aking sekretaryo sa Union. Bagkus po ang isinasagot po doon sa investigation unit ng LTFRB, puro naka-data privacy daw po.
Huh?
So nag-request po kami ng sulat sa kay chairman. Ayun po, gumawa kami ng kasulatan pero hindi pa rin po kami napaunlak ang mabigyan.
Ano pong ibig sabihin nila na, pasensya na po, ano pong ibig sabihin nila na naka-data privacy? Yung kontrata sa...
Yung po ang binabanggit sa amin na hindi raw po, dapat nga po yun, public documents yun na hinihingi namin para malinawan namin kung totoo ba doon sa press ko na inilabas ni Chairman Delgran noong February 8, nung matapos po kaming mag-ingay, diniklara po niya na 100% po, bayad na raw ang consortium, ng ES Consortium. So marami pong manggagawa sa nakapaloob sa ES Group of Companies na marami pa pong pautang talaga. Hanggang ngayon nga po, meron kaming unresolved case. Hinggil din dito sa issue na to, sa unpaid salary ng libreng sakay nung pang isang taon. Hanggang ngayon po, hindi nare-resolve ng ahensya ng DOLE.
Pero kinulit nyo na ho ba yung ES Transport? Dahil ang sinasabi ng LTFRB, bakit sila ay hindi naman kayo nagpa-file ng formal report mientras nagpupunta raw kayo sa media. Ang tanong nga is, sabi nila, employer-employee relationship daw yan issue.
Opo, ma'am.
So, ano po ba talaga? Kayo po ba may communication sa ES Transport mismo? Sino man ang nagpapatakbo ng consortium?
Meron po. Batay nga po dun sa mga pagdadialogo namin sa operation, ang lagi pong bukang bibig nila ay ang problema daw po ay ang LTFRB. So pupunta na naman po kami sa LTFRB, ang ituturo ay operator. So kaya po nung mga panahon na yun, naisipan po namin, wala nang paraan, kundi pinag-dribble-dribble kami. Kasi yung nagkaroon daw po ng problema yung system ng land bank. Isa pong ginawa nilang dahilan yan, yung system ng land bank. Kaya po na-delay ang liquidation para ma-disburse yung mga payment namin. So, nung nagtagal-tagal na po, talagang hindi ma-resolve na, nagsampa na po ako ng kaso sa DOLE para po maimbestigahan nga ito na unpaid salary nga po kami, sobrang delay na po. Hindi lang naman po super at conductor ang nakapaloob dito, kundi yung mga superior din po ng mga ES group of companies na tinamaan din po nung iskema ng pasahod ng kumpanya kasi nga po ang itinuturong dahilan ay ang LTFRB. So, kaya po hinihingi namin na malinawan na sa aming mga manggagawa, maglabas po ng formal na dokumento na maipakita sa amin kung talaga bang may liquidation pa na hindi nababayaran. Pero bakit po, bukod danging itong ES Consortium, ang mas sigit na tinamaan, lalo na po kami, yung ES Group of Companies, ang tinamaan ng pagpapahirap na sa ganitong sobrang delay na sahod. Bakit naman po yung kabilang consortium, meron man po sigurong may mga naniningil pa po mga manggagawang tsuper, hindi lang po sila makapaglantad kasi meron pong pananakot na sinasabi yung mga driver na once na gumaya sa amin magreklamo tungkol dyan sa issue ng unpaid salary, sila daw po ay magagaya sa amin na tatanggalan ng hanap buhay. Kasi po kami matapos po nung aming pag-iingay, ang naging kapalit po nung aming sinisingil na pinagpaguran, inalis pa po kami sa trabaho.
Mga ilan po kaya yon, Mr. Visconde? Kasi itong patapos nyo nga daw mag-ingay nagkatanggalan. Mga ilan kayong naapektuhan noon?
Mahigit 100 manggagawa po na tsuper at konduktor ang inalis.
Nag-file kayo ng di ba, ng reklamo sa DOLE. Kumusta na yung status ng reklamo ninyo ngayon?
Sa ngayon po, hanggang ngayon ongoing yung aming hearing. Patunayan po, may hearing na naman kami sa 22, sa Biyernes po. Ito rin po yung issue na inireklamo namin na hindi masagot-sagot ng management. Lagi pong ang dumadalo yung abogado lang nila. Ayaw pong humarap yung may-ari. Bagkus sinasabi hindi pa raw nga rin nakakabayad yung LTFRB. So, yun po, laging paikot-ikot lang kami. Kaya nga po kung minsan mananawagan na rin po ako kay Secretary na Laguesma sa ngayon, sa kasalukuyang bagong administrasyon, na sana po ay masolusyonan na itong problema na to. Kasi bakit po patawag na ng DOLE ni Yusek Ana Johnny na magharap-harap po kami ng dialogo nitong nakaraan lang pong buwan, hindi po kami sinipot ng LTFRB, alaman lang pong representative na dumating kahit isa sa LTFRB. Kasi ito nga po, hiningi namin itong dialogo na to para sa kalinawan po ng mga konsorsyum, mga manggagawa na apektado po doon sa hindi pagpapasahod ng mga operator.
Samantala po, itong mga nakaraang buwan at lalo na ngayon sa mga susunod pa na buwan, ano pong kinabubuhay ng mga tsuper? Tsaka paano po nakakaraos? Gayang sabi nyo nga, kayo na mismo nagpapaluwal.
Sa ngayon po, yung karanasan ng mga naiwan namin mga kasamahan dyan sa ES Group of Companies na katunayan po, hindi naman po sila union, nakagaya ng ES Transport. Sila po ay nagtitiis na lang. Pero ang bukang bibig po nila ay yung sahod pa rin. Umiiyak po sila, hindi lang po sila makalantad, dinadaan na lang nila sa social media, text dito pag komento ng komento. Hindi lang po sa ES. Bukod po yung ES Consortium, meron pa pong mga nakapaloob na maraming super ngayon na ang maririnig nyo po ay sobrang delay. At ang sabi, 7 linggo na po silang hindi sumasahod. Bagkos ang nakasaad po sa kontrata, lingguhan dapat ang pasahod. Lalo po ngayon, yung kasalukuyan na to na programa. Pero ganun pa man, hindi natin alam kasi po hindi na rin ako sumasama sa biyahe. Hindi bagkos po ay yung mga tinutuloy ko na lang po itong hearing natin sa DOLE. Pero yung mga kasamahan po namin na iwang manggagawan super at konduktor doon, nagbibigay na lang po ng mensahe sa akin para sa panawagang ito. Na hindi naman po talaga, hindi ko po iniiwanan at gusto po namin mapatunayan ano ho ba yung nakapaloob dito, sino at kanino napunta yung pera. na ikinasasama nga po ng loob ng ahensya na bakit nasasabi namin sa labas yung ayaw nilang ilabas yung dokumento na kung talagang bayad na 100%. Ipakita po nila sa amin kung talagang may liquidation na singilin pa. At isa pa po, bakit ganito na yung issue? May issue na po na hindi kami nakakasahod, nakakatuloy-tuloy pa po ang operasyon ng aming kumpanya. Tapos sasabihin nila nalulugi. Bakit kung nalulugi sila sa programang ito, dapat huminto na sila. At ang sinasabi nga po nila, lugi, sobra sa tao, kaya po kami tinanggal. Pero ang pagkakaalam lang po namin sa mga pagrereklamo namin, kaya kami tinanggal, wala daw po kaming ginawa kundi puro reklamo. Hindi naman po kami magrereklamo kung hindi kami inaapi sa pagpapasahod. Kung talagang tuloy-tuloy yung pasahod nila, kapital, may hanap buhay nila yan, dapat nangangapital sila para sa amin. Bagkus po, kung ano po yung dinidetaalye, para lang po kami iginigisa. Kung hindi kami bumiyahe, wala po. Sasabihin nila, hindi rin nakakasingil. At marami pong biyahe namin, lalo na yung ruta ng BGC SM North na Route 32. Marami pong manggagawang driver doon, super na hindi po nasunod yung 30% na dapat ay kikitain ng mga driver. So yun po yung mga hinahanap namin mga dahilan na sinasabi hindi raw po kasama sa programa. So kung hindi po kasama, bakit hindi mismo yung operator namin ang magreklamo sa ahensya para dito patunayan nila kung talaga bang hindi kasama. Yun po yung gusto namin mga malinawan sa ahensya at sa operator. Bakit hanggang ngayon po talaga, mahigit 1 taon na, bakit hindi pa po kami nababayaran ng kumpleto? At yung mga insentibo po na dapat namin inaasahan, hindi po naibibigay. Yun po ang mga katanungan saan at kanino po napunta yung mga dapat para sa mga manggagawa.
Okay. Maraming salamat po.
Visconde.
Mr. Visconde.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po.
We'll move on to another topic. The positivity rate in Metro Manila has jumped to 12.6% as of July 16. Is this cause for concern? Let's hear from Okta Research Fellow Professor Guido David. Welcome back, the Chiefs, Mr. David.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening, the
Good evening,
Chiefs, Robbie, Ed, Lucci, and Ami. Yes.
Prof. Guido, positivity rate 12-point-something%, and kanina pinag-uusapan natin sa big story. Dati sanay tayo na, almost everyone were used to tracking the numbers on a daily basis. Baka magulat sila because they haven't tracking for quite some time. 2,000 new cases today. That's still far from our peak of tens of thousands before. But safe to say, this is a surge. You usually have some sort of a qualifier on either side of surge. Is there any way to qualify this?
Well, Robbie, I think na-mention ka kanina, and sorry, my screen is a little blurry, pero na-mention ka kanina na, the surge is, well, it is a surge. It's not at the level of what we had in January and in last year. Last year, we had more than 20,000 cases in a day. Noong January, umabot tayo ng almost 40,000. Right now, we're at 2,000. Pero we also have to qualify na we're testing a lot less compared to last year and early January. So we're testing 50% fewer tests compared to January, and only about 1/3 of the tests we were conducting last year, because a lot of people are resorting to antigen tests, which is cheaper and it's also more portable, and you get results faster. And a lot of people do home testing, so a lot of these cases don't get reported anymore.
So may
For a while there, you were saying for a while there, you were saying na parang magpipeak earlier than forecast. So, ano ba talaga?
Well,
Sooner than you expected, or
Originally, Luchi, we projected around mid-July yung peak sa NCR because that's where the wave happened first, this surge. And we were basing our projections on the experience of South Africa, which has similar types of experiences as the Philippines. So they had the BA5 and BA4 surge, and it lasted about 2 months. So it means about 1 month until the peak. So basing on that, we estimated that the peak will happen around first or second week of July in the NCR. Sa other provinces, it's only starting to accelerate now. So it's far from peaking in many provinces. Pero in the NCR, there's actually some hope that it actually has peaked as of a few days ago. Pero we're still waiting. We need to wait maybe a week more before we can say with some level of confidence that we have seen the peak. Kasi yung daily positivity rate sa NCR has gone down 3 days in a row. So that gives us hope na, maybe the peak has happened in the NCR.
Pero may estimate ba kayo kung how much kaya yung unreported cases, yung actual numbers?
Yeah, Ami, ito yung calculations namin. So compared to last January, we're testing 50% less. So it should be, the actual numbers will be at least ×2. Pero in January, we noted because of the DOTR and rapid antigen testing or random antigen testing, we were seeing only 10% of the cases possibly. So ibig sabihin ngayon, mga ×20. So if we multiply the 2,000 by 20, we get 40,000. That may seem like a high number, yes, because it's comparable to January, what we saw. Of course, in January, it's probably underreported also. Pero, we could have 40,000 cases, but we are only seeing 2,000 cases. One other thing is the DOH stopped daily reporting, so we actually had to do the daily reporting ourselves although they still provide the data every day, but they don't report the daily numbers. They report the weekly numbers, which I think, for many people who are watching the numbers, it got them out of the watching of the numbers, so to speak. Pero,
And is it possible na yung positivity rate now is higher than in January? Kasi itong mga subvariants ngayon, mas contagious pa daw dun sa original ng Omicron eh.
Yeah, it's more contagious compared to yung BA2, which spread in January. But just like in South Africa, the BA5 wave was smaller compared to the BA2 wave. Bakit? Because we still have some wall of immunity built from infections and built from vaccinations and booster shots. So malaki na itutulong ng booster shots. So it's preventing the transmissions. Kumaga, without the booster shots, without the vaccinations, we would probably have 50,000 cases per day or so right now.
Pero yung critical element ng hospital utilization, what about that? Are we seeing higher numbers, or is there cause for some bit of alarm?
There's a bit of concern. Usually delayed naman yung hospital occupancy. So for a while, it was hovering around 28, 30%. As of today, it jumped up from 31% the day before to about 34%. And that's a bit significant jump. We won't be alarmed yet, because if the trend is going down, that means siguro, it's not going to get filled up. We won't reach the 50% threshold set by the DOH. Pero of course, cases there are still cases in hospitals. So it's not like, all people are mild or asymptomatic. There are still people who get severe COVID. And that's why we need to still monitor and inform the public when cases are rising, because there are people who will be vulnerable to severe COVID, and they're the people who are the target of our information. Maybe the general public, the young people, they don't really care, if they get COVID or not, or they just want to go out, and but for the vulnerable sector who do care about the effects of COVID, they should definitely be informed. That's why we're informing the numbers every day.
Sir,
Well, the new,
Go
the
ahead.
new administration is discussing the possibility of changing the alert level system for COVID. Do you have any suggestions in that area? Do you think it should be changed?
Actually, we did make that suggestion, Amy. It came from the group headed by Joey Concepcion.
Joey.
Yes.
It's the Advisory Council of Experts, and we are actually part of that. And we proposed this change because that's what the other countries are doing moving forward. The alert level system was designed for last year for the Delta variant, but a lot of factors have changed. Doesn't mean this will be permanent. If a new variant that is like Delta comes, hopefully not, then we will definitely retweak our metrics again to adjust for that. But so far, all the variants that we're seeing are Omicron derivatives, meaning they're similar to Omicron, mostly mild. There will be some severe, a few deaths. And so that means, in a way, we can more easily balance the economy with public health. And this is the focus of the new system that we proposed to the administration. Of course, they'll probably look at it and study it, or maybe come up with their own. But this is also being used, I think, in New Zealand, and that's the basis of our proposal.
Sir, how different is this new system compared to the present one? I understand some sort of a stoplight system of some sort?
Yeah, that's correct, Ed. It has 3 levels lang, like green, yellow, red. In the old system, we had more levels, but because we changed the threshold, so mas batas na yung cutoff for certain things, then we just have basically 3 compartments. So pag red, pag green, things can go on as normal. It means very low risk, essentially. And we don't really have to be very concerned. There will be some cases, but it won't be a lot. If it's yellow, cases will be higher, at a higher level, but hospitals are not threatened. So we can still more or less proceed with life, but we just need to be more careful. And if it's red, then there could be some interventions, or there could be not. As a green, it's possible that it could even be proposed that the mask mandate could be relaxed. But again, this is part of a broader framework of exiting the pandemic.
So is this a simplified version, sir, or is there something else that we're missing out on conceptually?
Well, you could say it's a simplified version, but it's more geared towards the Omicron or milder version of the virus. It's more or less simpler to understand. So that's the premise of it, and that more or less we can sort of live with the virus with this system.
What about the booster? Do you think that mandating the booster in even relaxed form, like no entry, no booster, no entry, will that help, do you think?
Well, Luchi, actually, yung booster coverage is part of the system that we proposed. Now, we can only go green if we have a certain level of booster coverage in a region. Ibig sabihin, kung mababa yung booster coverage, then it will never go green. And this was part of the suggestions of the medical doctors in the group, since we have many medical experts there. Ako personally, I'm never in favor of mandating or requiring boosters or vaccines. I'm of the opinion that we should be doing an information drive to convince people to get vaccinated and boosted. It's made it difficult for me to imagine it being mandated, especially there will be legal aspects to it. And, some people will probably, contest mandating. And this could be also contentious for children. But I think the private sector can step in. I think they can require certain employees to be vaccinated or boosted. And this was already discussed in our group, especially kunyari, let's say sa tourism, mga economic frontliners. I think the employers can almost require their employees to be vaccinated for the safety of their clientele. So I think that I'm not sure if that will also apply to schools. For example, school teachers may be required to get back, or the schools may require the teachers and the employees in the school, to get vaccinated bago magpasokan. That way, we don't have to mandate it to children, but we can maybe not mandate it, but at least the employers can sort of impose these requirements on their employees.
Professor David, could I ask about, I mean, you mentioned your group, and we sort of got into it as people by now may be aware or maybe not, that you have come into some sort of a consortium with experts that a lot of people got to know over the course of the pandemic. And leading that group now is former presidential advisor for entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion. He has always been a private citizen, but all the more now that he no longer has that position. Could you talk more about this group coming together, the objectives, and most importantly, what's the relationship and the engagement of this group with the new administration?
Well, Robbie, as I understand it, the new administration actually has several groups, advisory groups that have been set up and led by, the private sector, like certain leaders in the private sector. So there is an agricultural group, advisory group. There's one for health. There's one for economic. It's several groups, and one is headed by Joey Concepcion, a private citizen. And what I admire about Mr. Joey Concepcion is, yes, he's a businessman, so he sees it from the angle of the economy and from businesses, but he's also very much willing to listen to experts and to medical doctors who often, and we have seen this in the past, the public health experts, the doctors, usually take a different position from the private sector. The doctors are more conservative with regard to public health. So we see this actually within the group, so it's not imposed by certain individuals. It's more of an agreement. We have debates, there are differences in opinions, and the idea is to advise the administration and the president on a science driven policies. So we're looking at exiting the pandemic. What should be the requirements, if we want masks to become optional. So those are some of the aspects that we have studied. And next we're going to be looking at schools. What would be the challenges up ahead, and many other factors relating to the pandemic and perhaps for economic recovery.
How do you feel about the November face-to-face classes, 5 days a week? Is that something that is it in the distant future and we don't have to worry about it now? Or is this the time to prepare for that if it does come? I mean, because kinukontra pa maraming teacher. But if it happens, are we ready given the resources of public schools?
Well, Lucy, I know it seems like it's several months away, but for me, it's actually very close for me, and we should be complacent. We should be planning ahead and not do things when it's October or September or October, and then we would have to rush things, because we would need to plan ahead, because we need to clarify certain parts of the of the process. And of course, we understand that the Department of Education will be on top of this, but there will have to be a concerted coordination with other institutions and departments as well. For example, do we have enough public transportation to accommodate the students who will be going back to school? So we're not even talking about the policies and the procedures in the schools themselves, and that includes whether vaccines will be encouraged or required for teachers and school employees. What about the children? From my understanding, we haven't really approved a lot of vaccines for children for 5 to 11. I think some brands have been approved, but not many. And there may be a lot of children who are not vaccinated who may want to be vaccinated, or at least their parents may want them to be vaccinated. When we understand that it's optional, it's the decision of the parents, especially for 5 to 11 years old. So, these things, and if they want to get vaccinated, baka pagdating na November, if the state of public emergency has been lifted, the vaccines will no longer be free and they'll have to pay for it. And they will say, oh, we should have vaccinated them before September. So that's why we can't wait until it's too late. I mean, we have to make sure that these guidelines are clear to the public and to the schools so that they can prepare in advance and the things that they have to do to prepare for this. So it's not even talking about the school policies and protocols. And we also understand now once we have face-to-face. By the way, we do support face-to-face classes because it's been too long, 2 years, and children need to be in school. Pero we understand that if we have face-to-face, it's going to be expected that there will be outbreaks and there will be, you could say, super spreader events in schools. There will be some spreaders and there will be infections, and we don't know how that will be to the public, to the parents. And that's why we have to set our expectations that this is likely to happen, and so that people won't be panicking when there will be outbreaks among students. We know that most cases for children will be mild and asymptomatic, but of course there will be cases when there will be children who will have comorbidities, children with asthma. So and then when they get COVID, it might be more than just mild for them.
Okay, Professor David, maraming salamat po. Professor
Thank you,
Guido David.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you, the chief. Okay.
Professor Guido David of Octa Research. And we'll be starting up another conversation after a quick break. Stay right there. The chiefs will be right back.
The descendants of the last Sultan of Sulu seeking to seize Malaysia's state-owned oil-rich assets after a centuries-old claim results in a legal victory. The rest of the story from Princess Jacel Kiram, whom we will have in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I understand you talked to her last night.
Oh, we did. Basically, a lot of the things that people have heard of by this point, that case has moved. I think a lot of and a lot of people, a lot of parties were caught by surprise. Even the Malaysian government, diba? A lot of politicians, parliamentarians, really up in arms right now on a very basic point of why didn't they realize that this was moving?
They refused to participate. Malaysia did.
Yes, they didn't, but nonetheless, precisely because of that strategy of trying to, of basically ignoring this.
Sounds like China.
Oo, di ba? Nagulat sila that something actually moved. All of a sudden, you have a bailiff serving that, what would you call that?
It's serving the notice of seizure. What's interesting is, because I was able to find the decision, it's kind of long, but several points that had to be talked about and clarified. Of course, what was clear was the award of $14.9 billion. That's in dollars. That's substantial. But aside from that, the arbitral ruling also said, number one, that in effect, Malaysia did not buy Sabah from the Sultanate of Sulu. It was a lease agreement.
It was a private lease.
It was a lease agreement, not...
In other words, buhay pa, no?
Yes.
Buhay pa yung deal, between the British and gano'n ba yun?
Well, successor state kasi yun eh.
The heirs, no?
Successor kasi ng British North Borneo Company yung Malaysia eh. So whatever the North Borneo Company had in dealing with the Sultanate was passed over to Malaysia.
Yung kontrata,
Which in effect is what Malaysia did. Inako nila yung kontrata. But Malaysia was insisting...
Tapos yun nga, hindi nagbayad.
Yeah. Maliban doon.
Kumbaga hindi niya binili.
Malaysia's position kasi is that Malaysia's position is that the 1878 contract in effect was a purchase contract. And we took over that contract, therefore we own Sabah. But the arbitral ruling said that was not a purchase contract, it was a lease contract.
Because otherwise, I mean, this is another detail that people may be aware of, at least in periphery. What was the regular payment to the clan? Diba? The $5,000 or so.
Yeah. The Malaysians call it session payment because they claim that it was a contract of session. In other words, you were ceding the property.
Hulugan pa rin.
Oo, hulugan pa rin.
Hanggang ngayon.
But they stopped in 2013 eh. But their claim was that they made the purchase. It was ceded to the North Borneo Company and then therefore it was passed on to them. So binenta balik.
What I'm curious about is the process.
Ang tanong ngayon, well, yun ang laging tanong, basta may arbitration eh. Can you enforce the ruling ng French Arbitration Court? Anong chances nun? Ikaw, what do you think?
But that's a question, I mean, that's a question on several levels eh. On one hand, you're talking about Malaysia claiming it's an attack on its sovereignty because it has possession of Sabah. Therefore, is it up for arbitration or not? Secondly, in practical terms, you're talking about 4 million Malaysians living in Sabah. So even if we could say that we own Sabah, what do you do with 4 million Malaysians?
That's what I was curious about.
All we know is we can use the oil a lot.
Well, that's true.
Pero ito nga, no? I mean, just for the Philippines, how do we stand to benefit from it? Maybe that's something that can also help us appreciate, diba, the way it's going right now.
Yeah, yun nga kasi
what's in it for the rest
to begin
of the
with,
country?
if legally it still belongs to the Kiram family, does that also mean? I'm not a lawyer, but it's a question that we should be asking. Does that also mean that it is now Philippine territory? Is it legally Philippine territory now?
Kaya karami na yung Malaysian doon at nag-referendum yung mga yan at tinanong, do you want to be part of Malaysia or the Philippines?
Yeah,
Paano
that's the
kung
other thing.
tumabas na ang boto overwhelmingly for Malaysia,
And
di ba?
you can expect that.
Di ba?
we have Filipinos from
Yeah, they have Malaysian passports,
we
di
have
ba?
Filipinos from Basilan, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi who seek refugee status in Malaysia. So that tells you a lot of things about
Oo, tawiran lang nila. Tinatawid
that
lang
tells
nila
you a
yan,
lot
di
about
ba?
people in that region preferring to live in Sabah instead of in the southern Philippines.
Yes. Saka it's not just a plain issue of possession is 9/10 of the law. Kasi yung mga nakatira doon talagang gusto nilang tumira doon, di ba? Yan ang problema dyan.
Yeah. In fact, when we visited there in 2001, we were talking to some Filipinos there in Malaysia, yung mga TNT sa Sabah na Pinoy.
Kung atin yan, hindi TNT yan, ano? Hindi ba?
My other question.
Okay, pero itong sabi nila, ang sabi ng mga kausap namin, ayaw nilang makuha ng Pilipinas yung Sabah. Mga Pinoy ito, mga Pinoy ito. Dahil sabi nila,
Bakit daw?
umalis nga kami ng Pilipinas para takbuhan ng Pilipinas. Tapos hahabulin nila.
Well, anyway, obviously, one of the things that we knew is that this reopens a can of worms na matagal na nating pinag-aaralan, matagal na nating, well, paminsan-minsan pinag-uusapan sa grade school, sa high school, pero ngayon, it's out of the minds of most people. The politicians don't necessarily always touch it. My question is still a lot on the process right now. For example, I'm really curious, maybe you know this better than us, Ted, but the Kirams, when we speak of them as the descendants, the heirs, and as a clan, is that a solid clan? Lalong-lalo na ngayon, may dollar figure na pinag-uusapan. Baka may magsulputan dyan na, insan!
That's a bit problematic kasi you know how it is with the Muslim families. They tend to become really expanded families.
Yes. But there were officially designated heirs, di ba?
Ang nag-file ng case are only 8 heirs. Ang question is how far down the line yung beneficiaries.
Kasi magsusulputan yung mga kamag-anak ngayon.
Marami na raw silang naghahati-hati.
Ikaw, may dugong kiram ka rin, di ba?
Tanungin natin yung mismong member ng family.
Yeah, is she here ready?
Mukhang may
wala pa.
may ano pala.
Wala pa eh. We're still
No,
waiting for her.
we do have a guest already.
She's on the phone.
okay.
She's on the phone.
Dr. Ibrahim Baji.
Oh, okay. Now joining us is Sulu Sultan Dr. Ibrahim Bajin. Magandang gabi. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Ibrahim.
Waalaikumsalam, Tuan.
Magandang gabi po. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening po.
Sultan, kayo po ba isa dito sa 8 nagsampa nitong kasong ito doon sa Madrid?
Hindi po, sir. As a matter of fact, my Bajin clan and the Jainal Abirin clan, the descendants of Shakirullah and Sultan Shakirullah and Sultan Aliuddin, were not represented during the filing of the case.
So you're also contesting this po. You should be included, you're saying?
Yan yung tanong ko.
No, not actually, but we are asking for a reconsideration of this ruling.
Oh, sir, magsabi po yung reconsideration, ibig niyo sabihin gusto niyo kasama kayo sa ruling? O...
That is right, sir. That is right. That is right.
Just to be clear, sir, ano pong katatayuan nyo within the Sultan's heirs and clan?
I was actually put up by a people's power because of the so many sultans that have already mushroomed up due to the controversy of this ruling. I was catapulted to the people's power to be the paramount sultan of all the sultans of Sulu.
Pero sir, Sultan, kayo po ba, are you a direct descendant of Jamalul, the one who signed the treaty?
As you see, sir, the Sultan who was the beneficiary of the North Borneo trophy was Sultan Salahuddin Karamat. And this Sultan Salahuddin Karamat is 7 generations ahead of Kiram, ahead of Badin, ahead of Jainal Abirin. So it does not include only the Kiram families or the heirs. There are also the other families of the Sultanate.
So paano po yan? Nag-initiate na ba kayo ng legal action to contest or yun nga para mag-reconsider ng arbitral ruling? Kailangan umakit din dun sa French Arbitral Court.
We have been sincere with our stand that we are not being represented and we are not being represented by this ruling. That is why we are appealing.
So nag-file kayo ng appeal ba? Yun ang ibig niyong sabihin?
Wala pa, true protest lang. By protest lang sa amin ng kuan. That we should have been reconsidered during the ruling of the Makaski.
Sa inyo pong...
You see,
So hindi po kayo official party.
hindi ma'am kasi no,
Hindi
during
po
the time
kayo official party.
during the time of the representation when the case was filed. Hello?
Opo. Go ahead po.
Yun po, naririnig namin.
Yes po.
During the time of the representation, when the case was filed by the Kirams, the descendants of Shakirullah and Aliuddin, Sultan Shakirullah and Aliuddin, were not represented because the leaders at that time, sultans also, said that we cannot make a foreigner decide for the future of our territorial possession. So they did not go for
The foreigner
for,
being... Sino yung foreigner?
France.
What do you mean you cannot... They were saying that they cannot make a foreigner decide. Which foreigner?
Pardon, ma'am, pardon?
Ang sabi niyo po, na ang sabi nila ay they cannot make a foreigner decide this. Tama po ba?
That is right, ma'am. That is right. As far as I know, that is the very reason why the other families of the Sultanate, what is this, heir, were not represented because they refused to let the foreigner decide for the final decision.
Ayaw po ninyo yung arbitral court na manggaling sa ibang bansa.
Because they cannot allow a foreigner to decide for the fate of their possession.
Pero sino po dapat sa tingin nyo ang dapat mag-decide?
Ito.
That's between two sovereign states eh. Di, siyempre, merong gigit na dapat dyan. Sino sa tingin nyo ang dapat na mag-resolve ng issue?
Dapat international court, ma'am. Dapat international court, not just the court of Malaysia.
Hindi, French arbitral court siya.
Hindi naman po to Court of Malaysia. Opo.
Arbitral court po siya ng France.
Okay. We abide by the ruling of France. So, yes.
So ano po ang korting gusto niyong mag-settle na itong argument na ito?
An agreement which it should have included the other heirs to the Sultanate.
Teka Sultan, para lang po malinaw kasi medyo nagugulan na po kami. Yung pumirma po doon sa 1878 agreement, si Sultan Jamalul Alam, kayo po bale...
No, ma'am. Jamalul Alam was already dead. Sa kwan, nung sign ng Makaski Agreement.
So sino po pumirma nitong 1878?
It was signed by Princess Piandao.
I'm sorry po, sino po?
Sino ho yun? Kaano-ano po yun ni Jamalul?
Kiram.
Okay.
As you have noticed, it is only the Kiram family who are represented in that agreement.
Okay. How many
Pero
families po are...
kamag-anak po ba yun?
Pardon?
Sultan,
Kamag-anak rin po ba yun ng mga Kiram?
Yes. Sultan, Dayang Piandao is the eldest daughter of Sultan Badaruddin.
Jamalul.
The brother of
so
Sultan Jamalul Kiram.
okay. Sultan, ganito na po. Ilang pamilya po ang sa tingin niyo dapat ay kasali dito sa kasunduang ito? Ilan po baling, how many clans or how many families are we talking about? Kasi walo po yung nagsampa ng kaso eh.
Oo nga. As a matter of fact, we are studying that with our legal advisors and our aides before we finally make the application for this case.
Yes, sir. Pero yun nga po, ilan pong pamilya ang tingin niyong dapat kasama dito? Ilan po bali kayo bali? Ilan dapat yung...
Okay. The family of Sultan Shakirullah
Okay.
and the family of Sultan Aliuddin.
Okay. So, yung dalawang yun,
And the Kiram family.
so 3 families po.
Okay.
3
Three
families.
families.
Pero isang pamilya lang po yung nakasama dito sa kasong ito.
Isang pamilya. They were, these three were the sons of Sultan Azimuddin the first.
Okay. Anyway, we're almost out of time, pero maraming salamat po sa inyo, Sultan Ibrahim Bajin. We will have to
Yes, sir.
carry this through to another episode. In the meantime, we do apologize. We did intend to have here Princess Giselle Kiram of the Kiram clan, but due to some technical difficulties, hindi po natuloy ang kanyang guesting. We'll pick up this conversation in another episode, but for now, that's it for this episode of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.